everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calla Patterns. In this video, we are now at part 3 of sewing the Boronia Bowler bag. In this video, we're going to sew the lining pieces for the interior of the bag. What we're going to do is we're going to start by sewing our accordion gusset pieces. So I have all 4 sets. I have my exterior fabric, so what's going to show when you're looking on the side of the bag, what's going to be showing on the lining side of the bag. So I use the same fabric as my main lining, and I have 4 identical sets, and I'm just going to pin them right sides together. I'm going to do that for all 4. And then I'm going to bring them over to the machine, and you're not going to sew the straight edge here on the side. You're going to sew along the top and the angled side, and then the shorter edge at the bottom. And you're going to do the same thing for all 4 sets. I've now sewn all of my gusset pieces. All you need to do is trim the seam allowance a little bit at the corners, so that when you turn it out right side out and you push out the corners, that they'll look very nice. And then you can use a chopstick or something similar to push out the corners so they look nice. And then all you want to do is press the seam allowance on all the sides, and then you're going to top stitch with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the sides that you've just sewn. And you do the same thing for all 4 accordion gusset pieces. We're now going to sew up our slip pocket piece. So you're going to need one of your main lining pieces, and you're going to need your 2 slip pocket pieces. Pin your slip pocket pieces right sides together. I'm going to take this out of the way. So you have these pinned right sides together, and you're going to sew all along the edges, but you're going to leave an opening. I leave an opening of about 3 inches, and you just make sure that you back stitch when you start sewing, and then also when you end sewing, so that when you turn your pocket pieces right side out, your stitching isn't coming apart near the opening. My 2 slip pocket pieces are now sewn together. You're going to do like you did for the corners on your accordion gussets, and you just trim away a bit of the seam allowance at the corners. Make sure you don't cut any stitching. And then you turn it right side out through the bottom. And then you just use a chopstick or something similar, and you just gently poke out all your corners. I'm going to do that for all 4 corners. And then you're going to press the seam allowance nice and flat. I've now pressed the seam allowance around all edges of my slip pocket. One little tip when you're pressing the seam allowance, if you want your seam allowance to look nice and straight, one little tip is to just dampen your fingertips, and you kind of roll the seam until you can see where the stitches are, and then press. Now we're going to take this over to the machine, and we're just going to top stitch along the top edge of the slip pocket piece. I've top stitched the top edge of my slip pocket piece, and now I'm going to pin it to one of my lining pieces. You want the top the top edge of your slip pocket to be 3 inches from the top edge of your lining piece, and center it, and then pin it in place. And then when you sew your slip pocket, you're just going to sew it along this side and the bottom edge, and then the other side. Make sure that you backstitch at the top corners when you start sewing and you stop sewing the slip pocket in place. My slip pocket piece is now sewn onto the lining panel. I'm just going to fold this in half with the lining panel wrong sides together. And then you're going to use your fabric pen and you're going to mark the top edge and the bottom edge of the pocket at the center. And then you're going to bring it over to your machine and you're going to start at the bottom center mark and sew up towards the top center mark. Make sure that you backstitch at the top so that your pocket doesn't come undone. And then you'll have 2 separate slip pockets. I now have 2 separate slip pockets attached to one of my lining pieces. Now we're going to attach one set of accordion gusset pieces to this lining piece. You're going to measure 1 inch from the bottom corner, and that's where you're going to place the bottom edge of your accordion gusset. Now try to be precise because you're going to be sewing these together in the end and you want them to be lined up perfectly. So just going to pin this in place, and then for now I'm just going to base stitch it along this edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now one thing to note is that whatever is showing facing up this way is what's going to be showing when you unzip your bag. This is what I want showing on the outside part of the bag, so make sure that whatever you want to have appear is facing up in this step. I have here just the same fabric as my main lining, and that will be showing on the inside of the bag when you open it. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to measure and pin this accordion gusset piece on this side. Now make sure that you have the wider edge of the accordion gusset facing the top curved edge of the bag. Now finished one of our lining pieces with attached slip pocket and 2 accordion gusset pieces. We're going to set that aside for now, and we're going to sew in our interior zipper pocket. So you're going to need your 9-inch zipper. You're going to need both of your zipper pocket lining pieces, and you're going to press the bottom edge of your zipper pocket lining piece towards the wrong side, approximately 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of the bottom edge. Make sure that you press both of them the same amount. And one last step here is you're going to trim away 1 inch from the top edge, so the edge that isn't pressed a bit. You're going to trim away 1 inch, and we'll set that aside for now. Then you're going to take your zipper pocket facing piece, and on the wrong side you're going to draw a rectangle that is 9 inches wide, because that is the length of our zipper. And you're going to make the shorter sides 3/8 of an inch high. You don't want to go any higher than that, because you want your zipper teeth to fit in nicely, and you don't want any stitching from when you attach your lining pieces to your zipper. You don't want that showing inside the rectangle opening. So first we're going to start by attaching the zipper pocket facing. So you want to place the facing on your lining piece, with the top edge of the facing 2.5 inches from the top edge of your lining piece, and you want to make sure that it's centered, and you also want them right sides together, and you pin your facing in place. And we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew the rectangle. And when you are sewing the rectangle, you're going to want to use a shorter stitch length. I use about 2.5 or 2.5, and keep your needle in the down position, and it's going to help you when you're rotating at the corners. You want to make sure that you have really nice sharp corners, and it'll give you a nice opening for your zipper in the next step. I've now sewn the around the rectangle on my zipper pocket facing, and it's now attached to my lining piece. We now need to cut an opening in the center of the rectangle box that you've just sewn. So I draw a line along the entire width of the rectangle, and then I draw a line going from that center line to each of the 4 corners. Now, you don't have to be very precise about this, and hopefully you can see this. And then you need to cut this out, so I just cut the line with my rotary cutter, and then I start to cut the diagonal lines with my big scissors, and I don't go right to the corner with these scissors because they're too big and they're not precise enough. And then I use my really tiny, very sharp scissors, and I just cut the rest of the way, and I try to cut as close as I can to the stitches at the corner without cutting any of the actual stitching. The more precise you can get with cutting in the corners, the nicer the opening for your zipper pocket when you're pressing the next step. Now, if you remember the tip I gave you for rolling the seam allowance for your slip pockets, you're going to do the same when you're pressing the opening. So you're going to go over to your ironing board, and you're going to flip the facing so that it comes out on the wrong side of your lining panel. And when you're pressing the seams, I just dampen my fingers a bit, and I roll the seam allowance until it is all the way out, and then I press it. So it takes a bit of time, but if you really want a nice opening to your rectangle, this is the way to go. And also, if you notice some puckering here on the corners, it's because you didn't cut close enough to the stitching in the corner. But again, just take your time and make sure that you don't cut any of the stitches, because your facing piece will come off at the corners. So I'm going to go ahead and press this now. I've now finished pressing the rectangle opening for my zipper pocket. I'll show you on the wrong side what it looks like, and you'll see there's no puckering at the corners, so I did a pretty good job with cutting the diagonal lines. Make sure that when you're pressing the rectangle opening that you press it from the right side of your lining panel and the wrong side. I just find it makes the opening look so much nicer. And I'm going to set this aside for just a minute, and we're going to need our zipper pocket lining pieces. So to start, take the shorter piece, the piece that you cut the 1 inch from the top, and we're going to attach the zipper on this piece first. So turn your piece so that it's right side facing up, and then center your zipper along that top edge of your lining piece, and make sure it's centered so you have an equal amount of space here at the beginning and the end of your zipper. and you want the top edge of your zipper tape to be aligned with the top edge of your zipper pocket lining piece. And you can glue it in this step. I just pin it. It's whatever you prefer. And then you're going to take this over to your machine, and you're going to sew all the way along the top edge to sew your zipper to your lining piece. And I usually sew it on with 1/4 inch of a seam allowance along the top here. And don't just baste it, you're actually sewing it in place. I now have the zipper sewn to the top edge of my zipper pocket lining piece. I'm going to take it over to my ironing board, and I'm going to press the zipper pocket towards the bottom. So you're basically, if your zipper is right side facing up, you want to press your lining piece away from the zipper, and it should be wrong side facing up. Okay, so I have my first zipper pocket lining piece attached to the zipper, and I pressed it away from the zipper. So here my zipper is right side up, and my zipper pocket lining piece is wrong side up. I'm going to take my remaining zipper pocket lining piece, lay it right side up on your work surface, and the folded edge should be at the bottom. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to lay this with the zipper right side facing up, and the top edge of the zipper tape is going to be lined up with the top edge of your zipper pocket lining piece, and you just want to make sure that it's centered again. I'm just going to put a couple of pins to hold it in place, and then I'm going to go over to my machine, and again I'm going to sew them together along this top edge. Okay, so now my zipper is sewn to the remaining lining pocket piece. One thing I failed to mention is when you're sewing along this top edge, you're going to need to move your zipper pull out of the way when you get to this part of sewing on the zipper. I'm just going to go over to my ironing board, and I'm going to flip this, and I'm going to press the lining piece away from my zipper again. Okay, so I have my two zipper pocket lining pieces attached to my zipper, and they've both been pressed away from the zipper. I placed my zipper and attached lining pieces on my work surface with the lining pieces wrong side facing up, and the shorter lining piece should be at the bottom. My zipper pull is on my left, and then I'm going to take my lining panel with the rectangle opening over top. Make sure your zipper is centered within the rectangle opening, and you can use glue or double-sided tape or whatever you prefer. I just put a pin at both shorter ends of the rectangle opening, and I'm going to take it over to my machine, and I'm going to sew the zipper in place by sewing all the way around the rectangle opening with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm now sewing all the way around my rectangle opening to sew my zipper in place. Keep your needle in the down position, and I sort of just adjust the position of my zipper within the rectangle box so it's nicely centered. Now when I get to the corner, your needle is in the down position, and then you just lift your foot and rotate. I kind of go slowly here. And then you're going to do the same and sew the bottom edge. Adjust positioning if you need to. Okay, so now I don't want my zipper pull to get in the way, so I'm going to move it when I get too close. Just going to move it out of the way now. going to remove my last pin. Rotate. And then just make sure you backstitch at the end. Alright, and we're done. Alright, so I have my my zipper sewn inside of my rectangle opening. Now you're going to turn over the lining panel, and you're going to fold down the top lining piece so that the folded edge meets the bottom folded edge of the bottom lining piece, and you're going to pin those together. So they should be right sides together. And I'm going to take this over to my ironing board, and I am going to press this top edge so that it's nice and flat. So we're now going to sew up the sides of our zipper pocket lining pieces. We're not going to sew the bottom folded edges together. We're just going to sew along both sides. So start by placing your lining panel right side up and just kind of fold it so it's out of the way. And you're going to start at the top. You're going to include the facing piece and the two lining pieces when you sew the sides together. You're going to start at the top, and you're going to try to sew as close as you can to the stitches from sewing the rectangle around the rectangle opening. Make sure that you back stitch, and then I sew as close as I can to these stitches, and then you're going to sew all the way down to the bottom folded edges, and you're going to back stitch again. I'm just going to take my pin out of the way. Alright, so now we have one side sewn up, and we're going to do the same thing now for the other side, but this time I'm going to start from the bottom folded edge, and I'm going to work my way up to the top, and make sure you backstitch when you start and you end again. I'll show you a better view from above when both sides are sewn together. Okay, so now I have both sides of my zipper pocket sewn together. The bottom is still open, and I'm just going to trim away. I mean, you don't really need to do the trimming because it's not going to get in the way when you're attaching your zipper, but I just like to trim. And before we forget, turn over your lining panel and open your zipper pocket all the way. And this is really important because you're going to be turning your bag through this this opening in your zipper pocket later on during the final assembly. But as soon as I am done, I open it because I really don't want to forget. And now before we move on to the next video, all we need to do is attach the two remaining accordion gusset pieces. You use exactly the same method you used for the first lining piece, and you base them in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with the bottom edge of your gusset piece 1 inch from the bottom corner here on your lining piece. So I'm going to pin those in place. I'm going to base stitch them, and then we're going to move on to part 4, which is the final assembly. We're going to attach our lining pieces in our exterior shell to our double pole zipper.